Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Let's listen to an interesting story about a woman who wanted to sit on 2 chairs and a cunning husband who took revenge on all offenders with the help of improvised means. Our friends in blue showed up at my garage in the form of 2 police officers in a patrol car. I secretly watched them from my place under the lift. It was unusual to see such happy police officers. Their faces became more serious as they approached me. They confirmed my identity and said they had bad news for me. Something happened to my wife in our house and she was in the hospital, but they couldn't go into detail. I tried to leave right away, but they stopped me, wanting some answers. "Can you explain where you have been for the last 3 hours, sir?" one of them asked. "Yes, officer, I've been here all day. Just ask my 2 mechanics. Sorry, I actually snuck out for 10 minutes around 11 a.m. to get us coffee. One of the policemen came over to chat with Mike and Pete, while another wrote down which coffee shop I was at." "Can you show me your car, sir?" he asked. "Of course, my truck is outside." I took him outside to my pride and joy, the thoroughback bastard. He combed the interior, then opened the hood and felt the engine cold as a stone. "That's it, sir. You can go to the hospital." I had a look of concern on my face as the hospital staff member explained the extent of Kate's injuries. The fact that she had received a blood transfusion and then informed me that she was now undergoing surgery. I thought it was very unprofessional of the doctor to half-smile the entire time he was talking to me. On leaving the hospital, I was intercepted by the same 2 policemen who were in the garage earlier. They wanted more answers. We retired to the hospital cafeteria for some much-needed coffee. They wanted to know how my relationship with my wife was. I explained that we met and got married relatively late, 8 years ago. Kate worked successfully as an attorney for a large local firm. She basically wanted to have children but resisted my pressure until she was almost 40 years old because she wanted to establish herself in her job. They asked me why she was home on a weekday. I explained that Kate had quit her job a month ago to rest before her pregnancy, a sort of vacation before at least 10 years of domestic service. I then added, in conclusion, that I love my wife and we are doing well and looking forward to having a baby. They asked me if I knew a certain John Barton. When I answered no and asked why they were asking, they avoided answering and walked away. I knew I could rely on my guys to lock the garage, so I went straight home. 2 forensic scientists and 1 detective were searching the house. The detective introduced himself and explained what he knew. He then asked me the same questions as the previous officers, plus 1 new one. "Can you explain why we found a few drops of blood in the downstairs toilet, sir?" "Sorry, I have no idea, detective. Now, can I ask you something? It is clear that you are not treating this as an accident and also that I am being treated as a suspect. Can you assure me that you are not concentrating on me as the only subject but are also looking for the real culprit?" "You can rest assured, sir, that we have several lines of inquiry. My colleague is now talking to Mrs. Barton. Who is this John Barton I keep hearing about?" "Sorry, sir, I think it is inappropriate for me to comment." He and the CSIs then walked away, leaving me confused. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and looked at the scene that was playing out. I would be really shocked if I were watching it for the first time. Earlier in the day, around 10 a.m. at work, I started thinking about sex. There is nothing unusual about this. They say guys think about sex an average of 67 times per waking hour. Let me tell you that men who have been virtually cut off from their wives for a month can at least double that. Since Kate left work, our 2-3 times a week has dropped to almost 0. Kate was either in a bad mood, bored and depressed, or too tired. Personally, I thought it was because her normal life was almost over and she was just scared. Being a caring husband, I didn't want to put pressure on her. She will come out of her fear at her own pace. I knew that my life would change after having children, but I understood that her life would be turned upside down. I kept daydreaming about what our sex life was like in the early years of our marriage, anywhere, anytime. In any case, we made an effort to keep it fresh and new for as long as our imaginations continued to exist and then slowly fell into the automatic mode that 2 long-term partners often fall into. I snapped out of my stupor. I knew what to do, bring back spontaneity. Go home right now and have sex with Kate until you're unconscious. Okay, the decision has been made, it's time to get out and go home. I told Mick and Pete I was going away for a while. Pete asked if I could take the car he had just finished servicing for a test drive. When I got home, I was disappointed to see an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Damn it, my friend's visit ruined my plans. I decided to go in anyway. Maybe my friend could be persuaded to leave and my plans could be saved without any suspicion or attempt to hide. I opened the front door. My hair immediately stood on end and I knew my marriage was over. The obvious sounds of ecstatic sexual activity literally thundered down the stairs. It was almost a reflex action to pull out the phone and start recording video. Whenever a client brought the car to the garage, I always took a quick video recording so that we wouldn't be accused of scratching it. With my heart pounding, I ran up the steps and peered through the bedroom door, video camera at the ready. Yes, it was Kate, and yes, it was some guy I didn't recognize, happily having her on our bed. Fighting the urge to pounce and kill, I turned away. I can honestly say that this was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. My legs could no longer support me and I collapsed on the floor right outside the door, completely devastated. I was only dimly aware that they were reaching their peaks just around the corner. I don't know how long I stayed there, but gradually it dawned on me that all the sounds of their adultery had stopped and only conversations could be heard. It was just as bad and still tore me to the core. I knew I had to get out of earshot to give myself time to think. I instinctively knew that any reaction I made based on emotion would, at the very least, land him in the hospital and me in prison. I needed time to think. I quietly got up from the floor, tiptoed downstairs, and collapsed on the sofa, away from the sights, smells, and most of the sounds of betrayal. I was free from emotional distractions. I did what I knew best and came up with a plan. Get him out of the room and out of sight, beat the crap out of him where there won't be too many bruises. The stomach should be in perfect order, then throw him out the back door naked, come back for her, and throw her naked out the door. This should give them the right impression and give me complete freedom without bruises and witnesses. I hope I can avoid trial. Luckily, I had the perfect shock weapon in my workshop. 2 years ago, I served in the Army Reserve National Guard where my skills earned me the task of clearing the trucks we took back to base. That's where I found a small device that would now come in handy. Police call them stun grenades. Slightly larger than a regular grenade, they are basically a small canister with a lever pin ignition mechanism. They were specifically made for hostage rescue and were designed to cause little physical damage so that they could be thrown into a room full of innocent people without any significant harm. However, the explosion is accompanied by a flash with a power of 8 million candles and a shock sound of 170 dB. The flash alone can stun a person to the extreme for at least 5 seconds. My mind, driven by my newly acquired hatred, quickly formed the rest of the plan. I didn't want to ruin my house, so I couldn't just throw a grenade on the floor. I took out the device and quickly glued a short piece of rope to it, then put a loop on the end of the rope. Having thus prepared, I tiptoed upstairs. As I got closer, I realized that secrecy was no longer necessary. I distinctly heard a man's moans coming from behind the bedroom door. Stopping only to pick up the phone I dropped from the floor outside the door, I looked back at the door frame. It could be heard that round 2 was in full swing. My wife was actively having fun with her lover. Mentally rehearsing the sequence of actions, I took a deep breath and sprang into action. Having mentally rehearsed the sequence of events I had decided to do, I took a deep breath and took action. One step into the room, looped the end of the rope around the hook on the bottom of the light fixture, leaving the device hanging halfway to the floor. Pull out the pin, put it in your pocket, and walk out the door again, pressing your fingers tightly to your ears and closing your eyes tightly. Even with my precautions, the effect was amazing. I clearly felt the shock wave and the bright reflected light through my eyelids. Following the plan, I jumped into the room again, ready for action. This time it was my turn to be surprised. I don't know exactly what I expected to see, but it was nothing like the scene that appeared before me. Mr. Anonymous was lying on his back on the bed and his manhood below the waist was clearly damaged. Either nature was extremely unkind to him or something was missing. Kate lay on her back on the floor, her eyes blank, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Confused, I went back into the hall to think. My thoughts were soon interrupted by 2 unholy screams from the bedroom followed by various bangs and slamming doors. I began to realize that I was in deep. My plan had failed once again. I peered around the door frame at the scene of carnage. The guy rolled out of bed and curled up on the floor, holding his groin, screeching like a banshee. Kate was nowhere to be seen, but apparently she was in the bathroom. We needed to remove the evidence. I returned to the room, looked around, and quickly found the detonator mechanism for the device, adding it to the rope. I couldn't find anything else, so I concluded that everything else had been destroyed. I headed to the bathroom very carefully. Kate was on her knees, vomiting into the toilet. I had no desire to go and help her, I just didn't care anymore. On my way to the door, I noticed something on the floor. I picked up a piece of flesh. It was warm and soft and resembled the tip of a tongue. On the way to the front door, I went into the toilet on the first floor and flushed it. They wouldn't sew it back on. Trying not to squeal the tires, I rushed down the street, once again glad that we lived so far from the neighboring houses. Halfway to the garage, I dumped my pockets into a roadside trash can. 10 minutes later, I was back in the small garage that I called work. I called Pete and Mike, two dirty, oil-stained guys who I call my employees and friends. They hurried to me, seeing that I was alarmed. "Guys, I need you to be my alibi for the last 45 minutes. What do you say?" "Of course, boss," was heard almost simultaneously. "Well, before you agree so quickly, I must tell you that what I did is very serious, and once I explain to you what it is, you may not be so quick to answer. I don't know what I'll be charged with, but it could mean jail time." Before explaining this to them, I went into my office and threw on my dirty old overalls. I then walked over to the trash can and grabbed an oily rag, rubbing it into my face and hands. I didn't know when the police would show up here, but I expected them. The guys looked at me a little stunned. I briefly told them about recent events. Mike was the first to break. He tried to hold on for a good 15 seconds and then burst out laughing. This broke the ice for Pete, who soon joined Mike and me in uncontrollable hooting. It was a full 5 minutes before we all regained control, and with handshakes and promises of support, they returned to their oily engine bays. Over the next hour, spontaneous chuckles were heard from various dingy rooms. My wife Kate was about to reap the reward she deserved for keeping her distance from my lowly friends in the past. I was cleaning up the master bedroom that evening. I just washed the bathroom floor. I decided to throw out the bedding and made a mental note to buy a new rug for the bedroom. Torn curtains will also have to be removed. I tried to stay busy, avoiding thoughts. This process was not helped by constant phone calls and knocking on the door. Yes, the media was in feeding frenzy mode. The combination of adultery and a guy having his manhood bitten off was a story sent from heaven to them. I opened the door only once and soon turned off the phone. Finally, with nothing to distract me, I began to do some soul searching. Do I regret what I did? Strange, but no. I hated cheaters with a passion. I've seen too many guys turn into women when they catch their partners. The funny thing is that even before lunch, I was ready to bet my life on the fact that my wife shared this passion. I was stunned that I was so wrong, not to mention I was completely taken aback by Kate's motivation. She seemed to be as devoted to me as I was to her, and our sex life was absolutely wonderful. Well, until recently that was the case. After several hours of inner turmoil, I could only find one single clue. I remembered how the hairs on the back of my neck stood up 2 months ago when Kate announced that she was retiring to enjoy her last days of freedom. I expected her to work until at least the 7th month of pregnancy. Something about her saying she wanted one last hurrah before having kids struck me as odd. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of my personal cell phone. Few people knew this number. Caller ID showed it was Kate's parents' number. They lived in the same state but about 3 hours away. I always got on fantastically with them, so I answered. After much less of the usual pleasantries, her mother got down to business. "Dave, what's going on? Do you know why a bunch of journalists are besieging our house?" "Well, they'll have to find out someday. I just couldn't bring myself to go into detail." Mom, did you watch the local news this evening? Maybe the main news. What about some cheater who bit off her lover's dignity? I always liked her mom's colorful language and her views on life, but damn, it didn't make our conversation easy. Yes, Mom. Look, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll get straight to it. The woman's name is Kate. Luckily, my confusion was interrupted by a scream followed by a beep when I pressed the end call button on my phone. I noticed a warning on the screen. This reminded me that I wrote down the end of my marriage just 8 hours ago. I had vague memories of leaving my phone recording outside my bedroom door. I knew that if I never knew or believed the reason why Kate did what she did, I would never be able to trust any woman again. There was a good chance that I would die a lonely misogynist, doomed to a life of uselessness. With desperate hope, I started playing the video. I already knew what it was showing. The pain was too fresh to relive the scene. I opened my eyes just as I put the phone on the floor without a visual representation, just a view of the hall ceiling. I had to imagine Mr. and Mrs. Adultery lying side by side on the bed. I couldn't hear the sound clearly, so I downloaded the file to my computer and ran it through an amplifier. This is an important part of their conversation. Wow, Kate, it was fantastic last week. It has been great, actually. Does this really have to end today? My offer still stands. Just give me your word and I will divorce Sarah and marry you. Well, yes, it looks like it will work. A great start to a marriage with a guy who left his wife and kids. No, and I love Dave too much to hurt him like that. In addition, he is a great husband and will be a good father. After today, I will be Mrs. Goody-Goody, a housewife at least until the youngest of our children starts school. You can't love him that much. It's not him lying here next to you. No, you're mistaken. I love him very much. The moment I met him, I knew he was my only soulmate. I will never meet another. We are very much in tune sexually. I am happy that I have such a good man who spoils me and will nurse me when I get a big belly from his 2 or 3 babies. No, I want nothing more than to die in his arms surrounded by our grandchildren. Well, that was a great speech, but it begs the obvious question. Why are you with me now? At least Kate had the humanity to think about it. There was silence for a good half a minute. I guess I just missed the past. I didn't get married until I was 31 and was a bit of a wild girl. I miss just walking into a bar and getting attention from all kinds of guys, the thrill of leading a guy forward and then impulsively deciding whether he gets what he wants or not. Lately, Dave has been deer hunting with his buddies every other weekend. 3 weekends ago, I decided to take a trip down memory lane and check out a bar. This resulted in one night that was okay but unsatisfying. Then last Saturday, I happened to walk into the bar you were at and here we are. God, you're so cold, Kate. Just consider this the last hurrah. Anyway, what are you complaining about? Come here, I said. It had to end today. I didn't say it had to end right now. I turned off the sound. At least now I knew that I was a good lover and husband. The problem wasn't me. The following days passed in complete disappointment. 2 days later, the reporters demobilized and left my quiet street. The hospital administrator called me and said that Kate would like some pajamas. I missed this one. She will have to put up with these humiliating hospital gowns. 2 days later, her father called me. He apologized for his daughter's behavior and expressed hope that I would keep in touch with him. To try to sweeten the deal, he reminded me that he has another daughter and she was recently divorced. Sorry, Dad, it's just too weird. For days after this event, he was shown on the news again. Mr. Not-So-Big-Dick has been released from the hospital. Journalists dug up something and exposed him as a serial cheater. So it was with some pleasure that they announced that although the surgeons had succeeded in sewing his manhood back together, it was very unlikely that it would achieve any of its intended functions. At the end of that week, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Barton, or Sarah as she insisted I call her, was a pretty lady with sad eyes. She told me that she had heard rumors that I might have some evidence that could help her in her divorce case. I explained that maybe it was true, but I couldn't admit it without exposing myself. She understood everything and was very apologetic for asking. I told her that I thought there was such an abundance of circumstantial evidence that she wouldn't need what I had. If this turns out to be wrong, I will persuade her to return and perhaps change her mind. There was such sadness in her that I felt sorry for her. Pulling out the video file, I played her only in the aftermath of the big explosion. The shock of her husband's screams made her cower at first, but she soon pulled herself together. Suffice it to say that she was not very sad when she left. Being the helpful guy that I am, I invited her to come pick me up when the sadness returned. Oh yeah, that wasn't the last time I saw Sarah Barton. The last visitor I received was probably the strangest. On Saturday, I answered the door to the detective I had spoken to at the house on the day of the big event. The suit disappeared, leaving only jeans and a shirt. Hey son, no, I won't come in. I just wanted to say that if there was insufficient evidence, I recommended that the case be closed. Hearing my gratitude, he turned to leave but stopped and looked back. Listen, at the end of the year, I will retire. If I come back after this, will you tell me how you did it? I just smiled and wished him a good day. Kate's letter arrived the following Tuesday. My dear Dave, I can't express how ashamed and sorry I am that I did this to you. I understand perfectly why you couldn't bring yourself to visit me and I forgive you unconditionally. I never thought about the full extent of the possible consequences of my actions. I, of course, did not imagine that my parents would actually disown me. I know that I have lost your love, trust, and respect forever, which hurts me more than I can describe. I will understand if you never want to talk to me again, but it may help your recovery if you allow me to explain why I did what I did. Just be sure that it's all my fault. Doctors say that I won't be able to speak normally for a long time, if at all. They think I swallowed the tip of my tongue when I bit it off. They tell me about some experimental stretching technique that can restore some function. I hope this works and I can at least get back to my career as a distraction from the dull, loveless, childless future I'm currently facing. Ask anything you want in a divorce and I will sign it. If you could find it in your heart to keep me on your health and insurance for the near future, I would be forever grateful. Farewell, my love. I wish you nothing but happiness in the future. I hope I haven't completely ruined your life. You're Kate, aka your cheating wife. I must say that the letter touched me so much that I immediately reversed my previous decision and sent her pajamas to the hospital. Now, where are Mick and Pete's phone numbers? Do I owe them a beer? A keg each? I really liked the main character's revenge. He acted sensibly and cunningly while earning himself a good alibi. What would you do in his place, and would you dare to do such a thing? Now let's move on to another exciting story. Our main character named Sarah started cheating on her husband after 20 years of marriage. I wonder if we can understand her and justify her actions? It hurts when I pull back the curtains and look out the window, but I want to see my family and remind myself of the consequences of bad choices. My ex-husband lives across the street. His house has a swimming pool. I can't stop our boys from going out there and having fun. We do not have an official visiting schedule. My ex-husband and I often talk about what's on the boys' schedule every day and decide who takes them where and when, as well as who feeds them and when. That's all we talk about. I see the boys have started inviting girls. Their testosterone must be at its peak. They show off their fun dives and big splashes. It looks like it's working. The girls giggle. Girls, they are only 13 or 14 years old, but their bodies look older. I hope Rob talked to the boys. Someone might need to talk to him. This fitness instructor, since she's over 40 and an old lady for the boys, looks amazing in her bikini. I think of the old analogy of dental floss being bigger than what's on it. Am I exaggerating? Maybe. Am I really jealous? Yes, damn it, I'm jealous. Technically, our children live with me since I have primary custody, but I don't have a pool. They usually sleep and eat here. Most of their clothes are here. The boys are used to living in the house opposite. We were family friends with the family that used to live there. They had a boy and a girl about the same age as our boys. The children practically lived in both houses. Misty and Carl James were close to becoming surrogate parents for our children. Many believe that Misty and Carl had 4 children. Looks like we've had a good life. Yes, so what went wrong? The answer is I became a cheater. This is definitely not a statement of pride, it's just a fact. So, I wasn't a cheater for very long, but long enough to ruin my life and hurt my family. It took many therapy sessions to understand what I did and, more importantly, why I did it. Maybe this will help someone prevent them from suffering what happened to me and my family. My name is Susan Lawrence. I was married to Rob Lawrence. We have 2 boys, David and Eli, who are now 13 and 14 years old, respectively. I worked in a publishing house as an assistant editor. Rob ran his own security business for homes and offices. We were married for almost 20 years, although for the first 4 years we only dated between business trips. He was a military deputy. We met on a blind date. I was attractive enough to date myself, but Amy needed someone for her boyfriend's friend. My friend Amy was dating an MP who was trying to convince his mate Rob to join. Although Amy and her boyfriend never got married, my friendship with Rob blossomed knowing that he was leaving for a long time. It was necessary to urgently decide on our relationship. We wanted to make a big decision one way or another before he left. We got married. Rob and I agreed on almost everything: politics, religion, children, and fidelity. The glow of marriage kept me from temptation while I was waiting, although I had several active suitors. Rob left again after his first 2-year stint due to a re-recruitment bonus. This greatly affected our ability to run a household. It was hard on our relationship, but we got through it. Shortly after Rob returned, we decided to have children. I worked for 4 years, and after being fired, he got a job at a security company. My firm was willing to let me work out of our home during the latter part of my pregnancy and the first few months afterward. Soon, we had 2 babies a year apart. Life was good, not easy, but good. When the boys went to school, I started working more in the office. When the security company Rob worked for decided to sell its share to one of the nation's largest firms, Rob had the idea that he could run his own security business. His favor gave him startup money. I was scared because of the financial risk, but I believed in my husband. His departure from work was amicable, and several of the guys told Rob to call them when his business got big enough to need more employees. We squeezed and sacrificed for about 5 years before the business started to take off. Ironically, the impetus for the rise was increased interest in equipment that allowed people to spy on their allegedly cheating spouses. I continued to work. I liked it. I received good annual raises. The editorial business was strong because everyone seemed to have a book they had to write. I loved to read, and it was important to me that my opinion was valued. I managed to improve many books, although I rejected many. Now I have come to the conclusion that this is when I began to develop an increased appreciation for who I was in relation to my husband. Neither Rob nor I expressed any serious complaints about our lives. Our friendship, shared housework, finances, parenting, and sex life were quite satisfactory. Since everything was going so well, we settled into a routine. I didn't understand how dangerous it could be. My problem with Rob came about very gradually. By the time we began to take each other for granted, my attitude became increasingly negative. Why am I the only one doing the dishes? How is it that he or the boys can choose where to eat? Why doesn't he ever say sweet things like he did when he was courting me? Why am I only recognized on my birthday, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, and Christmas? Why do we always have sex the same way? These were some of the many ways I began to denigrate my marriage, but I asked my questions only to myself. I never brought this up with Rob. I thought that if he really loved me as much as I loved him, he would understand what was wrong. Why was it only up to me to solve our problems? My indignation grew. I became depressed, but continued to fulfill my role in the house. I had a routine that I began to perceive as a rut in which I was stuck. No one seemed to notice the change in me. For my own sake, I turned more and more to work. When I was happy with my home life, I didn't think much of the personal compliments I received at the office. Now I sought them out and treasured them. I started dressing more provocatively. I called it more stylish. When my husband noticed the change in my wardrobe, the comments, stares, and flirting in the office increased, and I loved it. They paid more attention to me. Then I made a decision that turned my life upside down. Hal, my boss, and I were working on getting the book ready for publication. The deadline was almost impossible, and we realized that we would have to work late on Thursday to be able to submit the final manuscript on Friday. One of the reasons I didn't mind working late was because Hal was one of my biggest fans and flirting partners. This did not stop him from being a handsome man, even though he was married. But damn me too. When we finished, Hal exclaimed, "I'm afraid I've ruined your plans for a home-cooked dinner." Don't worry, on Thursday nights, Rob orders food, which is pizza. He and the boys watch college football on Thursday night. They don't even notice whether I'm there or not. If you were my wife, I would never let you out of my sight. Forgive my double negative, I felt a jolt in my heart. I was flattered. I was excited. I stumbled and said thank you. Sometimes I feel like my family doesn't value me. Why did I tell him this? Please let me take you to dinner to make up for missing yours. I agreed, and we went somewhere near the office. It was a fish place, and we drank a bottle and a half of wine before we decided it was time for us to leave. Lunch was pleasant. We told each other about our home life and laughed about things that only teenagers think about. We both expressed some lack of spark in our relationships with our spouses. I think we both understood what a dangerous path we had chosen, but we continued to follow it. Hal dropped me off at my car. It felt like a first date, so I kissed him as a thank you. The kiss lasted far beyond a thank you kiss and not very far from a bedroom kiss. When we parted, we looked at each other with a look of what did we just do? I'm sure we both knew that this wasn't the only time we kissed. On the way home, I couldn't get the kiss and all the possibilities out of my head. It was so different and much more exciting than what happened day after day at home. It's been almost 20 years since I kissed another man. I felt scared. Will Rob notice how much I enjoy my time with Hal? Can I legitimately say that nothing actually happened? This would be true from a physical point of view, since we each had a few friends where kissing was part of hello and goodbye. I entered the house and heard a ball game being played in the office where there was a large TV. I'm home. I shouted. I don't know what they shouted back other than asking if I wanted pizza. No, thank you. I had a snack at a fast food cafe. Why did I lie about this? Looking back, I think this was the beginning of a psychological withdrawal that allowed me to view lying to my husband as more acceptable. I left the boys, including my husband, to play ball and went to bed. It was difficult to sleep, but the excitement of Hal's kiss had subsided. I was almost asleep when Rob literally flew into my bed. Hey baby, the Wildcats won. What are my chances of scoring with you tonight? My God, how old are you? I am working tomorrow. Now leave me alone. Rob said nothing but left the bed and the bedroom. I was still angry at him for a few minutes, and then I felt guilty for being too rude. Guilt couldn't make me get up and go apologize. I made myself comfortable on the pillow, hoping to see Hal in my dreams. I had to understand that once you start down the path of deception, you inevitably change your behavior with loved ones who trust you. When I woke up a little late the next morning, I saw no sign that Rob had slept in our bed. I entered the guest room and saw that he had spent the night there. As I hurried downstairs to prepare breakfast for the boys, I saw them eating breakfast at the kitchen table. Hello, Mom. Dad told me to let you sleep. He cooked us breakfast before leaving for work. I went for a cup of coffee. I needed to sleep after working late yesterday. I realized that I was trying to justify the time spent away from home, although no one asked me about it. I felt like both the prosecutor and defense attorney were fighting in my head. Soon, the boys were out the door to wait for the bus. I finished getting ready for work. I deliberately chose one of my older, more conservative outfits. I guess I was trying to make amends for how I've been soliciting extramarital attention from Hal lately. I felt like I had to hide what I had done. A less sexy dress will help. I avoided Hal until my meeting with the senior editor at 11, where Hal and I presented the manuscript we finished last night. The editor had several questions. Our meeting continued into the lunch hour, so it was only natural for Hal and me to go to lunch together. I think I knew what was going to happen when Hal chose the restaurant at the Golden Tree Hotel, one of the best restaurants in town. We broke a company rule and drank wine with our meal. For the first hour, we talked mostly about business. When it was time to head back to our office, Hal said we probably shouldn't come back with wine on our breath. With my consent, he called the office and said that we would not be returning today. After the call, I asked, so what are we going to do with the rest of the day? Having a conservative dress did not stop the cheater inside from coming out. Is wine to blame for everything? Why don't we continue what we started last night in one of the rooms? This was the moment of truth. I felt like I was floating outside my body as I watched the promiscuous woman in my place say, okay. My out-of-body self realized that I had just agreed to commit adultery, and I did it. It was exciting, primarily because it was a different person. I was in seventh heaven and he seemed pleased too. But with every step, I felt more and more guilty. He noticed this, so I lied about how wonderful it was. He asked if we would continue to do this on an ongoing basis. I told him that would be amazing, but I couldn't risk getting caught. I said that we should just leave it as a one-time fantasy and that it would never happen again. He was disappointed but agreed. I'm sure he hoped to change my mind later. Perhaps he was right. I wasn't sure about this myself. When we got out of the elevator, I was sure that everyone was looking at me and everyone knew what we had done. I hurried to his car and with great relief made it to mine parked at work. That's when the flood began. I cried and sobbed because of my carelessness. I betrayed my husband. I was risking my marriage. I put my family's future at risk, all for the sake of some mediocre sex with another man. After crying, I went home. I didn't know what to do. I arrived home earlier than usual and took care of household chores. I needed something, anything, to take my mind off what I had done. I had to keep Rob in the dark. I had to save my marriage. I needed to pretend nothing happened, but I was only deceiving myself. As soon as I saw Rob come in, I burst into tears. Zeus, what's the matter? What's happened? Are the boys okay? Between sobs, I blurted out. I'm the one who got into trouble. Have you lost your job? Got into an accident? Now, I'm sure this is something we can figure out together. It can't be that bad. Oh, yes, maybe, Rob. I slept with another man. When I reached out to Rob for a hug, he backed away. You, what? I had sex with another man. I do not love him. I love only you. Please forgive me. This will never happen again. This shouldn't have happened the first time. Or is this not the first time? This was the first, only, and last time, I promise. I promise. I remember you promised this at our wedding. Sorry, your promises don't mean anything anymore. His neck was red from hives which only appeared during times of extreme stress. I need to get out of here for a while. Do not call me. Please do not leave me. I'll just die if I stay. You might die, Rob. He headed towards the door. His words sent a chill down my spine. His experience and skills could be used for murder. Physically, it would be easy for him. I fed the boys and let them cross the street and swim with their friends. I didn't even bother calling Carl and Misty. Our children had a standing invitation to both houses. I used this time to figure out how to convince Rob not to divorce me. When the boys got home and Rob still hadn't returned, I told the guys that he had been called to work security out of town and might not come back that evening. They accepted my words and went to bed, staying up playing video games since there was no school tomorrow. I lay awake playing games in my head like, what should I do if I become a single mother, and will Rob want to get even or take revenge, and will he try to do something to Hal? Oh damn, I wasn't thinking about Hal's wife and kids. Of course, Rob won't harm children. It was harder for me to explain why Rob didn't come home all weekend. Fortunately, the boys played with other children almost all the time. Apparently, Rob used this time to figure out that Hal was my lover. As we worked together late on Thursday night, Rob showed up at our office on Monday and asked to see Hal. I didn't go to work on Monday due to ongoing anxiety. Hal later told me that Rob seemed calm. Rob said he wanted to apologize for his wife seducing Hal and hoped it wouldn't cause any problems that would interfere with my future work. Hal let his guard down and assured Rob that this wouldn't happen. That's all Rob needed to confirm his theory. He stood up and extended his hand to Hal. When Hal responded in kind, Rob grabbed his hand and pulled him towards him. A quick blow to the throat knocked Hal out of action. While Hal was gasping for breath, Rob walked around the table and kicked him in the balls, making it hard for Hal to breathe. Several more blows followed before Rob stopped. He told Hal that he didn't care whether he called the police or not. He'd tell Hal's wife about our affair and let her listen to the conversation he just recorded. Rob pointed out that after Hal's wife divorced him and Rob divorced me, Hal and I could do as much as we wanted. Rob was at Hal's house when he called his wife from the hospital. He had hoped to prepare his wife first, but Rob had already done that. She told Hal not to worry about returning home. The police picked up Rob at Hal's house and he offered no resistance. He went to jail on charges of aggravated assault. I visited Rob in jail and offered to post his bail. He refused, saying that it was time for each of us to learn to take care of ourselves. I asked him, "What about the boys?" He replied, "You should have thought about this before you decided to cheat. I had to live with it while I was growing up. It won't be easy for them, but I managed. Don't worry, they have the strength to do it." This was a part of Rob's home life that I knew nothing about before. Rob pleaded guilty. He tried to stop his public defender from using Hal and my infidelity as a mitigating factor. He didn't mind prison. He received 18 months but served only 6. It's been a tough 6 months for me and the boys. I almost never saw them because they knew that I cheated on their father and they always had a house across the street. I didn't file for divorce because I didn't want to get a divorce. When Rob returned from prison, we didn't talk about my cheating or the reasons why I cheated with Hal. Instead, we talked about what was best for the boys. I was pleasantly surprised that he agreed to stay in the house for the boys. He will stay in his den, sleep on the sofa bed, and use the downstairs bathroom. I didn't even dare ask if we could have a sex life again. I knew the answer. What actually led to our formal divorce was that Carl was transferred to another state. Their house was up for sale and our children were devastated. Tears seemed to stress the boys out more than the problems Rob and I were having. At first, I didn't know how this situation affected Rob. The first sign of his decision was that he filed for divorce and served me in my office. At this time, Hal was in the midst of divorce proceedings with his wife. I didn't receive any warning from Rob. He mentioned adultery, although the issue was only relevant in a divorce to resolve custody issues. He just wanted to put everything in its place. I wasn't that upset. My adultery was a fact. His next move was revealed when the for sale sign was removed from Carl and Misty's house. I walked over, hoping that this meant they would stay. That's when I found out they had sold the house to Rob. I understood everything. It was the perfect solution for Rob. He will see his boys as often as he and they want until I object or sell our house and move. I will still be their mother with primary custody. He was willing to help me with alimony and child support plus support for household expenses. Allowing me to see him and the boys so often in his house was his revenge on me. Clever man. Until he gets married again. I decided to let him know that I am not dating anyone. I will continue to be flexible with the boys. I won't put pressure on him. Recently, he agreed to have lunch with us sometimes. I know part of the reason is that he's a lousy cook. I pray that one of the reasons is a desire to return to the old days. Our dinners have begun to resemble old family gatherings, so I have hope. Objectively, some people would say that I have nothing to complain about. Even though I was a cheating wife, I got the house, child support, and primary custody of the children. Several women advised him to be more lenient since it was just one mistake of mine. Some told me that I should have resisted when he asked for more time with his boys than I was legally obligated to give him. I told these advisors to go to hell. Thank you for listening to these stories. Please share your impressions about what you read in the comments. See you again.